Hey everyone, I'm Chris Carter. It's the Locked On Steelers podcast. We've got Nick Farabaugh on today, and it is report day. The Steelers are reporting to training camp. I'll be on hand in Latrobe for that, but we got to preview the offense. We did the defense yesterday. I want to ask Nick the biggest questions facing this offense as they report to training camp, all here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com and you'll get 50% off your first year only at Monarch Money. More on them later. As I said before, we're joined by the man himself, Nick Farabaugh. He's back on the show. You know and love his work from PennLive.com. Nick, the players report today, Wednesday. We will both be on hand in Latrobe. Also, do not be afraid to say hi to either of us. We're both happy to meet our fans out at Steelers training camp. So if you're coming through, just drop a heads up. If we don't respond, it's probably because we on the move and we got to get to the next speaking thing, or we got to focus on who we're trying to interview. So understand that. But we are more than happy to say hi to people. But Nick, we talked about the defense with Allen yesterday with TJ Watt signed. That takes away probably the biggest question that was going to be for that. But now I think it goes back to the to the big question that I've been having about this offense, and it's how it's going to be run and what's going to be the priority. I think the priority as far as what's the most important thing for this team right now is that this offensive line starts to gel and solidify this year. They need Zach Frazier, Broderick Jones, Troy Fautanu, Mason McCormick, Isaac Seumalo, and at least those first three, the second rounder Frazier and the first rounders Jones and Fautanu. They need those three to step up and become big players this year so this offensive line becomes a much better unit. But I wanted to ask you, and I think you've agreed with that. What I wanted to ask you though, Nick, what do you think will be the calling card of this offense? Will it be running the football and being a ground and pound team, or do you think having Aaron Rodgers will make them a more dangerous, balanced passing attack that becomes the calling card of what this offense is for this year?
Well, I do think they're going to pass it more than they did last year. I think that's going to be something they're going to do. But I think the calling card of this offense is going to be multiple tight end, multiple personnel kind of out of that 12, 13, maybe even some interesting looks of 12 and 13 that I think are non-traditional because of the type of player Jonnu Smith is. You can use him in different ways.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be their identities, trying to run the ball efficiently out of different looks with their tight ends and then spread you out, condense the formation, create mismatches through the air with the run game humming. So you have to respect it. So basically they're going to try and get you into base and play base against their 12 and 13 personnel. So Jonnu Smith can be lined up against a linebacker. They can get Pat Freiermuth against the linebacker. It's what the Ravens really do well when they go 12 and 13 with Likely and Andrews is they force you to decide what you want to do, right? Do you want to take us on in nickel with Derrick Henry? No, you don't. Or do you want to take us on in base and try and put a linebacker on one of these tight ends? And that's, I think, what the Steelers are going to try and do. It's a very basic, I think, kind of vision. But the offense has to work in two ways. The offensive line, as you mentioned, has to work because if this team can't run the football, none of this works. None of the ideas around it work. Then you're putting the ball in Aaron Rodgers' hands, and we'll see what he can do if that happens. It's going to happen, I think, at some part this year. I don't expect this O-line to be so good. We're not going to see them have rough patches and that needed to kind of come through at times. So I do think that's going to be something to look at. But the tight end multiple kind of parts of this offense are going to be their identity. I think they're going to probably lead the league in 13 personnel. They're probably going to be top of the leagues in 12 personnel. And I think their 13 personnel is not going to be necessarily traditional. It's not going to be three tight ends with their hands in the dirt. It's probably going to be Jonnu flexed out and acting almost as a big wide receiver at times. And you're going to be able to do different things. So I do think that is going to be the identity of this offense is how can they run the ball out of their multiple tight end personnel groupings to try and create mismatches over the field. And if that can work, then I think that they can become explosive to guys like DK Metcalf and Jonnu Smith in the open area.
I think so too. That's the big thing for me is that This offense is going to need to find answers, and in finding answers, they're going to need young guys to develop, and they're going to need veterans that have been brought in to help. I mean, Rodgers, Metcalf, Smith, they're going to need to integrate fast, and I think that is going to be a challenge for Arthur Smith as offensive coordinator to balance all of that newness, whether it's new players to the roster or guys still adjusting to the NFL, to work in concert together and to work it together in a way that highlights their ability to run the ball. Like you said, they have to be able to run the ball. And again, that's why I don't care what anybody says. Aaron Rodgers is the biggest headline, but the Steelers, the way that they will go this year, whether they'll be really good, really bad, right in the middle or, above average, wherever they're at, it's going to be because this offensive line did or didn't come together and form a really good unit that could both run block and pass protect to keep Aaron Rodgers clean, but especially definitely running the ball. If Jaylen Warren and Kaleb Johnson, who we will get to at a later part in this show, are a 1-2 punch that is feared and respected around the NFL, it'll make Aaron Rodgers' job that much easier. It'll make DK Metcalf and the receivers' jobs that much easier. And then in turn, it'll make the defense's job that much easier because they won't be so tired by the end of the season because they're just playing all the time and having to be the focal point of what keeps the Steelers alive in any game. And that's where I do think while Aaron Rodgers is definitely important, DK Metcalf is definitely important, Jonnu Smith will definitely be important, the offensive line to me is the biggest story and the biggest factor to the success of this team and this offense.
It is. I mean, when you're talking about, just in terms of pass pro last year, Rodgers got absolutely pummeled just game after game. The Jets O-line allowed free rushers on stunts and blitzes, and Rodgers got hit hard, and he was banged up, and his play noticeably dropped off. As a result of that, he played a little gun-shy as a result, too. The quick game became a reliant rather than just a tool for him, and I think that's something the Steelers can't kind of fall into. Remember, last year I think the Steelers were too reliant on moon balls down the sidelines, a low percentage play. Just like in late Ben Roethlisberger's career, they became too reliant on quick game because the O-line sucked. Ben didn't want to get hit. That could be the same story this year. It could be just like watching 2020 and 2021 again if this O-line doesn't play well, where Rodgers is just taking 2 steps, getting the ball out, and defenses are going to creep down on that. So that's something to keep an eye on too. The other thing, when we talk about these tight ends, you talk about working in stereo with one another.
Yeah.
I am a little worried about how you use these tight ends together because Jonnu Smith, not a good blocker.
Yeah.
Pat Freiermuth, average to slightly below average blocker. He had his best year as a run blocker last year. Maybe he can take another leap. I think that'd be useful. But it's hard for me to play 12 personnel with those 2 tight ends if it's Smith and Muth on the field and think that you're going to have a really efficient run game without, say, 2 really good blocking wide receivers. So you're playing Skoranek more. How much do you trust Robert Woods? Does a Gabe Davis come into play there?
Right,
they need a way to make their 12 personnel work if they want to use Smith and Freiermuth on the field. Or do you take one of them off the field and just keep Darnell Washington on? There's considerations to make here. But if you want to utilize those 2 together, I think the mismatch game becomes harder because if you can't run the ball, why are they going to respond in base, right? If they don't think you can run the ball, they're just going to stay in nickel. And so that's something to think about too when you're talking about that. I think 13 personnel, it's a lot easier to get them to react to it because Smith is going to be a big wide receiver in those packages and different things. But I think there's a fine line you walk in using Smith and Freiermuth together in 12 personnel packages. So if you want your 12 personnel to be your kind of almost maybe your most used grouping, it's probably going to be right up there with 11 this year, I think, for them. Then I think you have to find a way to tiptoe the line when you have Smith and Freiermuth on the field of how you utilize that to make sure the run game doesn't hurt. Otherwise, the passing game doesn't work off that.
Absolutely. And part of the passing game are also the receivers. We talk a lot about tight ends and the run game in here. DK Metcalf's a big deal, but who's the next option after him? Let's talk about that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, whether that's a player on the team or a move that has to be made. Nick and I will go over those options next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Nick Farabaugh, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I remind you this show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier with Monarch Money? It can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own CFO. giving you full visibility and control over your finances, track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start actually building wealth. If you're like me, you're probably having a lot of subscriptions get placed and a lot of orders being placed online. Over time, that adds up to be a lot of money. While with Monarch Money, you can keep a close watch on all that spending in an easy to see, organized, and convenient presentation. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. We're also brought to you by Rougiette. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra and Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you are looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rougiette Ready. Rougiette is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rougiette's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rougiette might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. Head to Rougiette.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL. Use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rougiette website for full safety information.
Doing a podcast.
Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter, Nick Farabaugh. Nick, were you saying something right there before we went to break?
Yeah, I was. I got called from the other room, so I needed to.
Okay. I got you. I appreciate you. Just making sure. Hey, I'm on the show.
I'm on the show. People gotta know.
There you go. But yeah, okay. So we are we're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We've talked about the O-line, we've talked about Aaron Rodgers. Let's talk about wide receiver too, because that's the move that I think that's the next thing that Omar Khan's probably working on to make happen for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And it could be something that they find on their roster already. I doubt it. I think that they're going to at least add a wide receiver. But as we see it on overthecap.com right now, with the TJ Watt deal done and the numbers placed in there, his salary cap dropped about $7 million. They have right now about $17.6 million in cap space. So Nick Farabaugh is the second leading receiver, not tight end, is the second leading receiver to this season for the Pittsburgh Steelers behind DK Metcalf on this roster right now. Or will there be someone that gets added by the start of the season who will become that second leading guy?
The second leading receiver is on the roster. It's
Calvin Austin. It's Calvin Austin. All right.
But I still think, okay, here's my prediction. The second leading receiver is Calvin Austin, but he will not be the second leading receiver in snaps. That is my prediction.
Interesting.
So I think we do see someone added. And I think we actually see someone, a bigger bodied receiver that's on the outside, that's more of a decoy field stretching type that can block. I think Gabe Davis fits that really well.
That sounds exactly like Gabe Davis.
Right. I think that there's a few players that can fit that. Now, granted, maybe they see Robert Woods in camp and think he's the guy. So it's possible Robert Woods could be that guy too. But I do think they need, we were talking about the 12 personnel stuff working. I think if you can get another really strong blocker in there, I think that really accentuates the strengths of what you want to do out of 12. So I think they need that. And they just need somebody there that gives some depth, some comfort if DK Metcalf gets hurt. I think that's the other thing. If Metcalf gets hurt right now, this offense, this game plan, it falls apart. The Arthur Smith game plan kind of revolves around big X receivers and what big star X receivers can do. We've seen it with A.J. Brown. We've seen it with Drake London. We saw it with George Pickens. Now it's DK Metcalf. And we saw what happened when George Pickens got hurt last year. And if DK gets hurt again this year, that's something that I think is a real issue for Pittsburgh. So I do think they need somebody there just to have some comfort there that they have another realistic big X that they can go back to. So I do think someone else is coming, whether that's, in the cut window or if someone like Gabe Davis is still out there. But I don't necessarily think someone out there right now, at least that's available that we know of right now is out there that's going to make some big time difference. I don't think, the Jawan Jenningses of the world are really available. I don't think
Right.
Terry McLaurin's available. I know
Right.
people talk about Romeo Doubs, but no indication he's available. Like, there's no indication any of these guys are available. If one of those come available, the Steelers should go get them. However, I think right now it's realistic to think Calvin Austin's probably going to be your leading wide receiver 2, but maybe not in snaps. I could definitely see them having a heavier blocker like a Gabe Davis or a Robert Woods take that mantle.
That's interesting to hear. I think Calvin Austin has a lot of potential. I've said for years, I think he has the speed, but I think you've been seeing him grow the past few years. And this is a prove-it year for him. He doesn't have a deal beyond this season. And with DK Metcalf getting a lot of money, he won't get a mega deal to stay in Pittsburgh, but he can earn like solid money. I think if he shows up and shows, hey, I can be a really good second option behind Metcalf and not be that expensive. And I think that's or he can price himself and just be like, hey, look, I'm that good. I have taken these steps up. Someone is going to pay me on the open market, and I'm about to make the best contract of my life right now. But I'm with you. I think Calvin Austin can become that guy, but I do think the Steelers add somebody. But the thing I keep saying, Nick, is I think if the Steelers find that Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson just aren't getting it this year, that they're struggling, I do think the Steelers try to make a bigger move at wide receiver, because I think they're waiting to see how do these guys click with Aaron Rodgers. Now, if one or both of them do, you see them make a low effort signing, and Gabe Davis might even just be that. And that's not to dismiss him, but he's got a lot of money tied to him already because of his previous contract that he was just kicked out of, but he has a lot of money coming his way there. He's a free agent, so it won't cost you any draft capital to sign him, and especially at this part of the year with, even considering comp picks. So he makes a lot of sense. But let's say that, things aren't looking great in camp behind Metcalf, and you're like, man, there needs to be another guy there. That's where I think things could get interesting if Omar Khan wanted to keep playing the, hey, we're not the old Steelers card. I'm open to trading and making moves to get our roster where we want it to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they need to be looking at that regardless. I think it's listen, this room is not good enough. I just think let's just flat out say it. It's not. I think that there's a lot of potential. I think there's a lot of ifs, but there's no tangible answer. And I like Calvin Austin. But again, even last year when he was the second leading wide receiver on the team, he was third in snaps. Van Jefferson played a lot of football last year. And right now, I think you're looking at Robert Woods playing a lot of football for the Pittsburgh Steelers this year. And I don't think people necessarily want to hear that, because it's basically the same thing. It's Allen Robinson, it's Van Jefferson, and now it's Robert Woods, who is just unfortunate. He's far beyond his prime. Yeah. I think that's what you're looking at right now is Robert Woods playing a lot in 12 personnel, being a blocker for them, maybe some Ben Skowronek in there at times. But I think that's what you're looking at. And I think that is not a viable, good wide receiver room that you take into the playoffs expecting to have the firepower to win. And so, I like Calvin. I think Roman's got a chance. But if they're going so heavy into 12 and 13 personnel, how much are they going to really play in those packages? I question that. And so, I do think adding someone to this room, whether it is, if you look down to the cut line day and Christian Watson and his knee injury are going well, and the Packers say, hey, we'll float a Dontavian Wicks or a Romeo Doubs out there. I mean, you got to go get them. Just like last year, where I think the Steelers missed an opportunity when the Broncos cut Tim Patrick. Like, if a guy like that comes loose from some team, the Steelers need to be all over those guys. Trading a 7th or a 6th round pick to just skip the waiver wire and go get that guy is worth it to this team. So there are difference makers probably out there still at this position. There were last year. Noah Brown was another one for the Commanders last year, who they got him off waivers as well after he got cut. So there's probably going to be a few players that'll be out there for them to have, but they got to look at this consistently, because I just don't think the room's good enough right now, even though there are players I'm intrigued by.
I agree. I think there's things there. Let's now add in other positions. If you were to make a ranking right now, your prediction of who from first to fourth, who will have the most receiving yards for the Pittsburgh Steelers by the end of the season, list them in your order. You don't need to give me specific numbers or ranges, just the order of who will have the most receiving yards.
1, DK Metcalf.
Okay.
2, Jonnu Smith.
Whoa.
3, Pat Freiermuth.
Whoa.
And then 4, I'm tempted to go real spicy here, but I'm not going
to. Go spicy. I listen, man. It's hot out in training camp, so we need it hot on the show.
I'll say this, that I think it's probably going to be Calvin Austin, but don't be surprised. Don't be surprised if maybe not receiving yards, but receptions, if Jaylen Warren's up there. That's all I'm saying.
Ooh, that is spicy. I like to hear. Give us your theory behind that.
Well, I just think he's going to get so much run in these packages we're talking about. And he's such a good pass protector, and he's such a great receiver. And Kaleb Johnson, that's kind of his weakness right now. He's still working on his pass pro, the receiving part of his game. He's going to play a lot of early downs, but Jaylen Warren's going to play in a lot of obvious passing downs. I think 2-minute drills, he's going to get a lot of work. He's such a good receiver. Jaylen Warren last year, I mean, he was banged up last year and still was very productive as a receiver. He's always been really productive as a receiver when you look at it. I mean, he had 61 receptions in 2023 when he was fully healthy. Like, I don't think, and he wasn't the starter in 2023. Like, Najee played a lot. Like, it doesn't take a massive amount of volume for Jaylen Warren to produce a lot on receptions. And so maybe not receiving yards. Maybe he could get up there in receiving yards, but I think Calvin probably gets him in receiving yards. But in terms of raw receptions, I think there's a real good chance Jaylen Warren is up there on this team.
There you have predictions from Nick Farabaugh on the top 4 people. I'm with you in the initial order, but I like Jonnu Smith over Freiermuth. You think Jonnu Smith's going to be is he going to be a bigger factor for the Steelers offense than Freiermuth this year?
I think when he's on the field, he's the type of player you kind of have to manufacture touches to. Like, he's the type of guy that, you throw screens to and he turns into 30-yard gains. And he's the type of guy when you spread the field out, just is able to get more explosive plays. Right. Would not surprise me if Pat has more receptions, but Jonnu just has more raw yards. Like, I do think that is legitimately possible. And that's kind of what happened with Jonnu last year. He played, I think, 55% of the snaps, and he just had so many touches per snap because of the type of player he is. He is the type of player you funnel the ball to when he's out there, because he's a mismatch creator. And that, to me, is why I had Smith over Muth in terms of receiving yards. But again, if you're ordering by receptions, wouldn't be surprised if Muth has more. But I do think Smith is going to have this guaranteed high floor of touches just because of the type of player he is.
That's interesting. I had thought about it a little bit, but I'm not really committed either way to who will get the more receiving yards at the end of the year, because I do think Pat Freiermuth is still a focal part of this offense, and he's a longer term one. But Jonnu Smith is a talent that they will try. They need to use. So I'm right with you that I think he's going to be important. We'll see how this plays out as more time comes moving forward. We've talked a lot about that running back position. I want to look more at that a lot harder with Jaylen Warren and Kaleb Johnson. That's next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Nick Farabaugh, stick with us. We will be right back. But first, I want to remind you, this show is brought to you by Yahoo Fantasy. With Yahoo Fantasy, fantasy football is back. Fire up the group chat, get your draft board ready, and buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all the overreactions we live for. It's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy. I've used Yahoo Fantasy for my fantasy football leagues for years, and it's always a great experience. From a smooth draft day to a great mobile app, Yahoo Fantasy Football has been fantastic. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. It all begins August 4th. Stay tuned and get started by creating or joining a Yahoo Fantasy Football League at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. And let's make this fantasy season the best one yet, only with Yahoo Fantasy. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter here with Nick Farabaugh, continuing the show here. Nick, let's wrap things up by talking about this running back battle. We've talked about it before, but I've said along, Jaylen Warren's going to be RB1 to start this offseason, his training camp and everything, and he should be. I think he's paid his due. He's earned the right to say, hey, I'm the guy. He's going to have to learn from me. He's been an explosive runner. He's been a good runner. He's been a hard runner. He's also been the guy that's learned how to be one of the better pass protecting backs in the NFL. When you look at what he does to a lot of blitzers, I think that's certainly something that to his game that Kaleb Johnson doesn't have just yet, that he's trying to work on and get better at. But Kaleb Johnson was drafted for a reason in the third round. And that's because I think they see him as the future. Is there a point this season where he takes over as RB1? And if so, what week is that?
I mean, sure. Right. I mean, it kind of goes back to what I was saying. If this guy picks up pass pro and the receiving side of the game very quickly, and he's working so diligently to do that, sure, he could. I mean, Warren and Gainwell, to a degree, just have this floor of playing time they're going to have. They're going to take a chunk out because Jalen Warren's such a good pass protector, and he's
Yes, he is.
a viable and valuable outlet while also being a really good tackle breaker in open space. He's a great third down creator. So Jalen Warren's going to have like this floor. But if Kaleb Johnson, we know the pure rushing ability is there. So the early down work, he's going to get a lot early. So if this guy starts to really pick up pass pro, I think that's when it comes about. So to me, because of where he is and wasn't asked to do that a lot, it's probably a little later in the season. I think we're talking, November-ish, probably is earliest for that. Wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the year he is taking the lion's share of the carries, the raw carries. In terms of raw snaps, I wouldn't be surprised if Warren still keeps that throughout the year just because maybe Johnson needs a whole season to kind of see protection, see blitzes, and pick things up, and it takes a year for him to kind of take that in. But I would not be surprised if by November, if he is picking up on pass pro and that is coming along, because he's got a great frame for pass pro. He's a big dude. If he starts to really kind of eat into time and starts to get the lion's share of the snaps. But I think he's going to get most of the carries by probably week 11, 12, just because he's such a dynamic runner. He's a zone runner. He's a natural zone runner. People think Jalen Warren is. I think Jalen Warren's actually a better gap runner than a zone runner. If you look at his stats on gap runs, he's a little better at them. Not that he can't run zone runs. He's much better than Najee Harris was at zone runs, but he's more natural when he's got a pulling guard and he can get downhill and play his physicality up in between the tackles. I think that's something about Jalen Warren that's unique for his size. Kaleb Johnson, for his size, is a great wide zone back, great mid zone back. He's a glove-like fit in this offense, which is a lot of similar things to what Iowa did in the run game. So I think in terms of carries, I think he's going to have that lion's share earlier than you think, probably.
I think it's going to be interesting to see how that lion's share gets divvied up, right? Because, the Steelers, they want to get Kaleb Johnson involved, but Jalen Warren's a factor, and you want to balance those guys. I think the biggest thing is trying to balance both so that they can still have two dynamic backs going into the later part of the season that can wear teams down, especially when the weather gets colder and the running the ball becomes a bigger priority. All right. So, Nick, you've gone over how you see that playing out, but let's say end of the season, where do you see both of these guys at? What is your ceiling for them, and how close do they get to that ceiling in your mind?
Well, in terms of snap share or just stats?
Oh, let's do stats.
Okay, in terms of stats, if Warren has as good a year as I think he can have, because I think Jalen Warren's super underrated. I think we're talking about a guy that can get 60 plus receptions, have a career rushing season for him, talking 700, 800 yards. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he went for 1,500 yards from scrimmage this year. In terms of total, because he also, can return things. So if he ever needs to go back and be in the return game, that can be something he can be factored into as well. So I do think Warren this year could have a really good year. So, I'm thinking, the kind of floor for Jalen Warren is basically what his 2023 was, which was a really productive year as your RB2, an explosive changeup to a guy that's a little bit bigger. That year he had 61 receptions. That year he had over, I think, 600 rushing yards. So I think, that's probably around where you can expect him. As a ceiling, he could have a big-time season. In terms of what Kaleb Johnson, I think, can do this year, I think Kaleb Johnson is a pure runner. If he eats up volume early enough, he has the ability to break off big runs, and when he gets into open space, he can have game-breaking speed. He doesn't have instant acceleration, but when he gets going 10 yards down the field, he can take big runs. So, the ceiling for Kaleb Johnson is an over 1,000-yard rushing season. I think that is certainly a ceiling projection there. If you can get some explosive plays, if he could take on more carries quickly. I don't think we're going to see much in the receiving game from him this year. I think that is probably, a thing down the line he develops. But I think if you're looking at floor, somewhere around 500 to 600 yards, it depends on how this all kind of works together. But Warren in his 2023 season had 700 plus rushing yards and 61 receptions. 700 plus rushing yards and plus receptions. That's not a wholly realistic stat line for him this year, I don't think. And then I think for Kaleb Johnson, the ceiling is 1,000 yards, but I think you can get somewhere around 500 to 600 rushing yards and feel good about that.
Okay, that sounds interesting to me. Is there any chance this year that by the end of the season, both these players have over 1,000 yards from scrimmage, not all purpose, including special teams, and not just rushing yards, but rushing combined with receiving yards.
Well, as long as Warren stays healthy, he's getting there. I think that's probably going to happen. Johnson, I think, is probably going to have to get most of that through the air. Like eating it up, because I just don't know how much he's going to have in pure rushing totals. So it's possible. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. But I also think when we're talking about the passing game, I don't think there's a want to feed touches to Kaleb Johnson. Like there's a want to feed it to Jonnu Smith and DK Metcalf and Freiermuth. And if you're going to feed it to a running back, you just have Jaylen Warren. I just think you use Jaylen Warren. So, I think this running back duo, man, could be pretty potent for them this year. And so it's going to be really fun to watch in terms of how it works out. But I do think, 1,000 yards of scrimmage is probably going to have to come mostly on the ground for KJ.
I feel you there. He's Nick Farabaugh from PennLive.com. Nick, thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let people they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter, Farabaugh FB, Blue Sky Nick Farabaugh. Check out the stuff, PennLive.com/Steelers. Got stuff coming there. And check out the YouTube channel, The Steelers Blitz on PennLive.
He's Nick Farabaugh. Nick, thanks so much for joining us. Thank you all for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, same handle in every social media. It's at Carter Critiques. You can read my work in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette by going to post-gazette.com. You can find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday to Friday, breaking down your Pittsburgh Steelers. As I said before, the players report today. Oh, I almost forgot, Nick. Before we go, I messed up. You're supposed to do this at the start of the third segment.
Ooh.
I got to get your thoughts on these throwback jerseys.
Love the helmet. Not a fan of the jersey and pants. I wish they could be all whites. We
are on the same page here. Mr. Alan Saunders, he didn't like the pants, but he's like, the jersey, I can rock with the jersey. I can't rock with none of that except the helmet. The helmet, I like yellow helmets all day. Get it. But I'm right with you. The all white throwbacks from that would be so sick, especially you bust that out in the wintertime. Whew, that would be tight. But Nick's on my side. Take that, Alan Saunders, and everyone thinks that these jerseys look cool. Get them out of here. From Nick Farabaugh and Chris Carter, thanks for tuning into the Locked On Steelers podcast. Check out tomorrow. We recap Steelers reporting to training camp and getting you ready for the first practice right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.